You know Gandalf fell fighting a Balrog. But Tolkien's secret letters reveal why he had to die. For 10 days, Middle-earth's wisest wizard didn't just battle a demon, he battled himself. The Balrog's flames didn't just melt stone. They burned away every lie Gandalf ever told. What he found in the dark wasn't death. It was a truth so raw, Tolkien buried it for decades. Why did the Grey die so the White could live? This is Middle-earth Unveiled. Welcome, friend. It means the world that you're here. Let's journey through Tolkien's world together. Gandalf the Grey was more than a wandering wizard. He was a shepherd of hope. Sent to Middle-earth by the divine wisdom of the Valar, he walked among mortals not as a lord, but as a lantern in the gathering dark. For centuries, his laughter disarmed kings. His counsel steadied trembling hearts, and his presence whispered a promise. You are not alone. Yet beneath his humility thrummed a sacred restraint. Though born of ancient celestial fire, a Maya, like the Balrog itself, Gandalf was forbidden to confront Sauron's might with raw power. His strength lay in kindling courage, in stitching alliances from fraying threads. But even a being as timeless as he could not foresee how deeply his fate would entwine with the fragile souls he swore to protect. The mines of Moria became his crucible. Here, in the suffocating dark, greed had clawed too deep, rousing a horror older than the mountains. The Balrog, Durin's bane, a Maya like Gandalf, yet warped by Morgoth's ancient malice, surged upward, a storm of flame and shadow. Its roar shook the stones, its whip cracked like thunder, heralding a doom not seen since the First Age. The Fellowship fled, their footsteps echoing panic, but Gandalf stood rooted. On the bridge of Khazad-dûm, his staff flared, a fragile star against the abyss. You shall not pass, he thundered. Not a challenge, but a plea. A mortal's defiance from an immortal soul. The bridge shattered, the Balrog fell, and Gandalf, ensnared by its whip, hovered between life and oblivion. One breath, one choice. Let go, or doom them all. His fingers slipped. He fell. But in that fall, a greater design unfolded. Gandalf the Grey, humble, weary, bound by flesh, was unmade. The Balrog's fire scorched away his mortal shell, and in the void beyond death, he stood bare before Eru, the one who shaped the world. Here, he was reforged. Not as reward, but as necessity. I am Gandalf the White, he would declare, his voice now carrying the weight of both comet and crater. The Grey Pilgrim's gentle nudges had died in Moria. The White Rider would now wield authority like a blade. Yet his eyes, though brighter, held a shadow, a flicker of grief for the self he'd lost. But why did death bring about transformation? Why was this sacrifice the key? The answer lies in a truth Sauron, in his Tower of Pride, could never grasp. Power forged in pity outlasts power forged in dominion. It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand, Gandalf would later say. And that has made all the difference. His rebirth was no mere upgrade. It was a paradox, a fusion of mercy and steel. But what toll did the Balrog's flames exact on his spirit? And as the White Rider, walking the razor's edge between Olorin the Maya and Gandalf Greyhaim, does he still cherish the laughter of hobbits, the warmth of pipe smoke, the joy of being known? The road ahead will test him, not as a god, but as a guide who has touched the limits of both heaven and hell. The battle began in the suffocating bowels of the earth, where shadows clung like living things. Gandalf and the Balrog spiraled downward through Moria's crumbling halls, a necropolis of dwarven ambition and older, darker hungers. The wizard's staff cast frail light on walls, scarred by pickaxes and claw marks. Here, in the lightless deeps, the Balrog, a Maya of fire, once radiant, now a slave to Morgoth's ruin, surged upward, its flames devouring the air. Their duel was a symphony of opposites, one a hymn to destruction, the other a psalm of stubborn hope, but Gandalf refused to let the darkness claim its victory underground. With a roar that shook the roots of the mountain, he drove the Balrog higher, through skeletal tunnels, glacial fissures, and the fabled endless stair, until they erupted onto the spine of the misty mountains. The peak of Xiraxigil stabbed the heavens, its snows untouched by time. Here, eagles circled like judges. Here, the wind sang of elder days. This was no battlefield. It was an altar. For 10 days and nights, wizard and demon grappled on the precipice. Lightning split the sky. Their strikes mirrored the storm's fury. Gandalf's muscles burned. His staff splintered. The Balrog's whip coiled around his ankle, searing flesh and spirit. "You fear your own light," it taunted, flames licking at his resolve. "You cling to mortality like a child to a blanket." The true battle raged within. Every parry forced Gandalf to confront a harrowing truth. To win, he must release, not just his strength, but his very self. The Grey Wanderer, lover of pipeweed and hobbit gardens, would perish here. Could he surrender the joy of being Gandalf, the twinkle-eyed meddler, the teller of tales, to become something colder, sharper? The Valar had sent him to guide, not to rule. But what if guidance demanded kingship? He faltered. For a heartbeat, he saw Middle-earth's future. The Shire's green hills blackened, Rivendell's libraries ash, Samwise's garden choked with rot. The vision trembled, not from the Balrog's power, but from his own doubt. Then, clarity. Gandalf's choice was not between life and death, but between love and fear. To protect Frodo's stubborn courage, to spare a single hobbit laugh, he would burn. With a cry that echoed the music of the Ainur, he channeled every scrap of his being into his shattered staff and plunged it into the mountain's heart. Light erupted, a searing, sacred white, as Xiraxigil's peak split like a rotten log. The Balrog shrieked, its flames snuffed by the raw song of creation, and fell. Gandalf followed. His mortal form fell, broken, upon the rocks, while his spirit, luminous, unbroken, lingered. And in the void between worlds, a voice beyond the Valar, older than the world itself, spoke, "You have given all, so all shall be renewed." Death, for a being like Gandalf, was not an end, but a threshold. When he awoke, snow cradling his bones and sunlight blazing in his veins, he was no longer grey. He was white, a storm wrapped in skin, a blade sheathed in wisdom. Yet his first words, whispered to the wind, were not of power or prophecy. "I miss my hat," he said. The road ahead would demand ruthlessness, but in that quip, a spark of the old Gandalf flickered, a reminder that even gods, when they love the world, leave pieces of themselves behind. The world fell silent. High on Xiraxigil's peak, Gandalf's body lay cradled in snow, pale as marble. His fingers curled around the splintered shards of his staff, but his spirit drifted in the timeless halls beyond the circles of the world, a realm untouched by light or shadow, where even the Valar could not follow. Memories flickered like distant stars. Bilbo's trembling hand offering him the ring, Frodo's quiet resolve in Bag End, Theoden's hollow eyes, clouded by Saruman's venom. Had he guided them well? Or had he, like Saruman, mistaken wisdom for control? The void whispered, not with words, but with absence. The absence of pipe smoke, of birdsong, of the Shire's lazy rivers. For the first time in centuries, Gandalf felt small, a spark adrift in the dark. In life, he had been Olorin, a Maya of the Valar, cloaked in mortal flesh as Gandalf the Grey. His mission, to kindle hope, not command it, to mend, not master. But Sauron, his ancient kin, a Maya once radiant, now a tyrant of ash, had long abandoned such restraint. Power, to the Dark Lord, was a fist. To Gandalf, it was a seed. Yet here, in death, doubt gnawed. Had he planted enough seeds? Had his gentle nudges truly countered the tempest of Sauron's will? The void sharpened. Visions erupted. Aragorn, kingless, leading rangers to their graves in Mordor's shadow. Galadriel's mirror cracking, her light choked by despair. The mad steward's flames consuming his son, Faramir, on a pyre of pride. The ring, smug and cold, slipping onto Gollum's finger once more. You hesitated, hissed a voice, not the Balrog's, but his own. You cherished Middle-earth too much to risk it. To lead, you must rule. To save them, you must break them. Gandalf's spirit recoiled. Was this truth, or the void's mockery? He had seen what ruling wrought, Saruman's Tower of Lies, Denethor's madness. Yet if gentleness doomed the world, was mercy not a sin? Then, light. It came not as a blaze, but as a single note. Pure, clear. The first tone of the music of the Ainu. The void trembled. Before him stood a presence beyond form, beyond thought, yet radiating a father's sorrow and a sculptor's pride. Mithrandir. The name, Elvish, Grey Pilgrim, echoed like a benediction. You fear your love for them is weakness, spoke Iru Ilúvatar, his voice the rumble of mountains being born. But it is the lens through which I see them. You fell not for certainty, but for hope's fragile thread. That is why you rise. Gandalf's spirit burned, not with pain, but purging. The Grey's doubts, his mortal joys, dissolved like mist. In their place surged a terrible clarity, the White Wizard's mantle, heavy as a crown. Go, Olorin, not as a conqueror, but as a shepherd of wolves. Snow melted beneath him. Breath returned. Gandalf gasped, his renewed body shuddering, not with cold, but with the shock of a soul thrust back into clay. His robes, once grey, now gleamed like fresh snowfall under moonlight. Power thrummed in his veins, a forge heat that could level cities. Yet when he touched his chest, he mourned. The Grey's heartbeat, a steady, mortal rhythm, was gone. Reborn, he stood, not as a god, but as a vessel. The White Rider's power was undeniable, but his first thought was not of armies or strategy. Will Frodo trust me now? Will I still laugh? Eru's gift was no reward. It was a test, for Gandalf's greatest trial lay not in fighting Sauron, but in wielding this newfound authority without repeating Saruman's hunger or Sauron's pride. The path ahead demanded a blade's edge, mercy without indulgence, resolve without ruthlessness. But as Gandalf descended the mountain, his staff glowing like a captured star, a single question lingered in the wind. Can wisdom tempered by heaven still cherish the laughter of hobbits, the stubbornness of gardeners, the courage of small hands holding rings? So, why did Gandalf turn from grey to white? Well, he fell not for power, but for purity. The Grey was a teacher, a wanderer cloaked in humility. But to defeat a shadow, one must become a mirror. Sauron, a Maya like him, chose dominion. Gandalf chose devotion. His sacrifice on the bridge, his duel on the peak. These were not ends, but alchemy. The white is not a promotion. It is a confession. True strength lies in service. In dying for those who cannot fathom his grace, Gandalf proved that light, when surrendered, becomes limitless. Eru clad him in white, not to crown a hero, but to arm a parable. The meekest fire, tended by love, outshines the mightiest inferno. The Grey was a friend. The white is a vow. To fight, not with Middle-earth, but for it, even when it forgets his name. This has been Middle-earth Unveiled. Thank you for spending your time with me. Next time, we'll delve deep into how Tolkien viewed mortality and everlasting life. See you next time. What did Gandalf fear more than Sauron? For most in Middle-earth, Sauron's name alone can freeze the bravest heart. But deep in Moria's shadow, Gandalf faces a terror so raw it shakes him, a fear that breaks him, if only once. There was a rumor and a fear that had walked in dark places, and the dwarves said that it was a shadow of terror that dwelt in the halls of Moria. It had a name. Gandalf's voice sank to a whisper. A Balrog. A Balrog has come. The wizard who stood unbowed before Sauron, who never blinked at the Nazgul, is brought low by something older, something the world itself has nearly forgotten. What vision flickered in that fire and shadow to haunt him more than the Dark Lord ever could? Most never realize. Courage may turn aside many shadows, but some darkness runs deeper than memory, woven through the bones of the world itself. Before Sauron, before the Ring, before even the sun and moon, there was a force in Middle-earth more devastating than anything you've seen on screen. To understand Gandalf's deepest dread, we must journey backward, past the Ring, past the rise of Sauron, into the first discord and the birth of Morgoth's fiery shadows. Follow the trembling torchlight. Let it guide us into Middle-earth's oldest darkness. In the end, you may find the true threat has always worn a different face. It began before memory, when Eru Ilúvatar, the One, breathed the Ainur into song. Spirits whose music spun the world from nothing. Among them, one burned brightest. Morgoth, mightiest and most willful. But the music was fractured. Morgoth rebelled, splintering the harmony, and those who followed him, once radiant Maya, were dragged into shadow, twisted into Balrogs, fire-bound spirits, now shrouded in darkness. In the wars of the First Age, the Balrogs became Morgoth's fury made flesh. Wherever they passed, hope withered. Swiftly they came, and in the house of Melkor the Balrogs made a ring about them with whips of flame. Kingdoms shattered, heroes hunted, the world dragged to the brink of ruin. Most of these demons fell when Morgoth's fortress tumbled, but a few vanished, slipping into the bones of the earth, waiting for an age when darkness would rise again. In the long silence that followed, Sauron, Morgoth's greatest servant, learned a colder art, the power of order and control. His genius was not for chaos, but for seduction. The rings of power were his masterpiece, crafted to corrupt hearts with promises of greatness, forging an empire not for annihilation, but domination. But the Balrog in Moria is not a servant of order, nor a subtle corrupter. It is the memory of a more ancient ruin, a shadow before strategy, a hunger before empire. When it awakened, it didn't seek followers or parley. It raised Khazad-dûm out of primal hatred, leaving behind only ashes and myth. It wants nothing but the end of all song. So why does this matter for Gandalf? Because he, too, is Maya, spirit and flame, wearing mortal shape. He was sent to Middle-earth to shepherd the free peoples against Sauron's cunning. Against Sauron, hope is a strategy. Against the Balrog, hope is a candle flickering in a storm. Gandalf's words carry the ancient weight of his calling. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. But what could make one Maya, who has faced the eye of Sauron, tremble before another? What secret terror does the Balrog awaken that even Sauron cannot match? Let's go deeper, because here, at the crossroads of history and myth, hope and horror entwine. Tolkien scholar Verlin Flieger puts it simply: Gandalf's wisdom lies not in foresight, but in his understanding of the limits of his own vision. He is, more than any other figure, the agent of hope in Tolkien's universe. Not hope that events will go as he wishes, but hope that meaning can be found in whatever comes. It's this fierce, stubborn hope, the refusal to let meaning dissolve, that powers Gandalf's courage. But what happens when hope itself is pushed to the edge? In Tolkien's world, no shadow is born. Every darkness begins as light. Melkor, brightest among the Ainur, yearned to remake the world in his own image. In his pride, he shattered harmony and pulled the lesser spirits, the Maya, down with him, warping them into Balrogs. Spirits once radiant, now bound in fire and shadow. The Balrogs were more than monsters. They were Morgoth's wrath, given shape, heralds of ruin, old as the first dawn. The one that lurked in Moria carried a hatred ancient and undimmed, a memory of the world before sun or moon. Sauron too was Maya, clever and subtle, a maker and a schemer. But the Balrogs let go of craft, of plan, of hope. All that remained was their master's will to tear and consume. They were there as the two trees fell, Tolkien's original light snuffed, not out of strategy, but spite. They are the kind of beings that hate the light, not because it wounds them, but because it exists. When Gandalf stands upon the bridge, he confronts more than a beast. He faces the echo of what he might have become had he surrendered to the same abyss. This is not just a struggle for survival, it is kin against kin, a test of what endures when greatness is twisted beyond all recognition. But this is only the threshold, for if Sauron's evil is a net, the Balrog's is a storm, older, more elemental, a darkness before design. Sauron's genius is seduction, not savagery. The One Ring, his masterstroke, ensnares by promise, not by force. One ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them. He weaves power like a web, subtle, patient, mechanical. His armies march in step. His eye sweeps relentlessly across the land. Sauron dreams not of ending the world, but of owning every will within it. The Balrog is his opposite, a servant of chaos, not control. It burns for the joy of burning. It exists to unmake. No armies, no palaces, no followers, just ruin in its wake. With Sauron, Gandalf plays a game of wits, hope against despair. With the Balrog, there is no contest, only the raw collision of being and unbeing, light against the void. Creation in Middle-earth is slow, delicate, sacred. Destruction is immediate and absolute. The Balrog can erase in an instant what took ages to build. As Verlin Flieger reminds us, evil in Tolkien's world is never a separate principle. It is the shadow cast by the light, parasitic, unable to exist on its own. The Balrog is not an equal, but a remnant, darkness feeding on the memory of the world's original fire. But if evil is only ever a shadow, who stands as the flame? The answer waits in Gandalf and the mystery of the secret fire. Gandalf's words on the bridge, "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass," are not mere bravado, but the deepest truth of his mission. The secret fire, Tolkien's spark of creation, the living will of Eru Ilúvatar, burns at the heart of all that endures. Gandalf's magic is not domination but illumination, not conquest but care. His is the defiance of light in the face of unmaking. A distant echo of this burden rings through the road by Cormac McCarthy. A father and son, walking through ashen ruin, hold fast to one command: carry the fire. That fire, fragile, flickering, almost forgotten, is hope's last stand against annihilation. Gandalf is such a bearer. His laughter with hobbits, his small joys, his fireworks on festival nights, these are not distractions from his power, but its very source. In the shadows, he holds tight to the light. But the Balrog, once his kin, is now only the appetite to devour. Their clash is no longer about spells or swords. It is the raw struggle between what creates and what consumes, what remembers and what forgets. Here, Gandalf faces his truest test, not only to save his friends, but to stand as the final bulwark between meaning and the void. Stay with me, because in this battle, the fate of all stories, all memory, hangs by a single thread of flame. The duel is mythic, a plunge from Moria's deepest dark to Xeraxagil's storm-crowned peak, fought over endless days. From the lowest dungeon to the highest peak, I fought him, until at last I threw down my enemy and smote his ruin upon the mountainside. Morgoth, long ago, poured his own power into the bones of the world. His corruption seeps like poison through rock and river. The Balrog is the echo of that first discord, a remnant, not just a beast, but a fracture in the music of creation itself. It is a living wound, a threat to every harmony Gandalf is sworn to defend. This battle is not only for survival, it is the oldest conflict, order against chaos, making against unmaking. Lightning splits the mountain, shadows wrestle with flame. Two ancient powers, each older than time, collide, not only for their own fates, but for the soul of Middle-earth. And as the fire gutters and the darkness recoils, what is left is not triumph, but the high cost of holding back the void. At last, Gandalf's fear resolves into something almost tender, an ache not for his own life, but for the fragile miracle of Middle-earth itself. In the Balrog's burning shadow, he glimpses the last living remnant of Morgoth's original wound, a threat that endangers not only his mission, but the deep grammar of creation, the hidden logic that allows meaning to bloom in the world. Sauron's evil, for all its menace, can be unmade. Its heart is the ring, a thing that can be cast into fire. The Balrog, by contrast, is malice without a vessel, destruction woven into its very being. Where Sauron binds, the Balrog unravels. Its evil is not something you can destroy, but something you must outlast. Gandalf's fall and return are not merely the beats of an adventure, but the pulse of the universe itself trembling against the edge of the void. His resurrection as the White is not a restoration, but a divine defiance, a new creation whispered by Eru through the fabric of death and fear. Naked I was sent back, for a brief time, until my task is done. Tolkien, with the wisdom of one who had tasted both despair and wonder, wrote, "He was sent by a mere prudent plan of the angelic valor, but authority had taken up this plan and enlarged it at the moment of its failure." There is a quiet cost here. The Gandalf we knew, the Grey Pilgrim with his sly jokes and quiet pipe, dies atop that mountain, transformed. What returns is the White, less fettered, more luminous, a vessel emptied of self in order to be filled with purpose. But such victories are always bittersweet, and in the Balrog, Gandalf sees not only an ancient enemy, but a possible future, a reflection of what any Maya, any soul, might become when power eclipses compassion. His truest victory, then, is not the defeat of a monster, but the gentle refusal of the shadow within. Yet the story does not end at Xeraxagil's peak, because the darkness Gandalf faced is not a relic of distant legend. It's the entropy at work in every world, including our own. Michael Ender's The Never-Ending Story dreams of a land called Fantasia, slowly consumed by the nothing, a force that does not rage or conquer, but simply erases memory, beauty, meaning itself. The Balrog is kin to that emptiness. It does not want to rule, it wants to unmake, to return all song to silence. Gandalf's stand, then, is not only for victory, but for meaning, for the fragile, stubborn persistence of order and wonder in the face of annihilation. His fight is the fight we all inherit, to keep the light burning when the night grows deep, and to remember that even the smallest hope, carried forward, is an act of cosmic resistance. Tolkien's world is built on the struggle between creation and entropy. Morgoth's discord didn't destroy Ilúvatar's music. It made it deeper, more haunted, beauty laced with longing. Verlin Flieger captures it. It is the interplay of light and darkness, the shifting balance between the two, that gives Middle-earth its depth, its mystery, and its power. The Balrog, the Shadow, and the Secret Fire each play their part in this cosmic dance. That tension, making and unmaking, runs through every legend Tolkien told. The Balrogs are its starkest emblem, the will to annihilate, just because existence offends them. But here's the twist. We face our own Balrogs today, forces that unravel what is good, from the destruction of nature to the rise of despair and cynicism. Gandalf's stand on the bridge isn't just about magic and monsters. It's a reminder. Even immortals must make mortal choices. Preservation demands sacrifice. Sometimes, order must face chaos head-on. There's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting for, Sam insists. That's the essence of resistance: creating, caring, and keeping hope alive, even when all seems lost. Each of us bears a spark of the secret fire, the power to nurture, to build, to hold the line against darkness. The Balrog falls, but the struggle never ends. Gandalf's fear teaches us the greatest enemy isn't just domination, but the mindless forces that would return all things to darkness. And that's why sometimes you have to face the shadow directly, because the flame of creation is worth the fight. What if everything you thought you knew about Gandalf and Saruman was incomplete? When McKellen and Lee faced each other in Peter Jackson's adaptation, they embodied a conflict far more ancient and profound than most viewers realize. A conflict rooted in the very foundations of Tolkien's universe. And hidden within their confrontation lies a secret that changes everything. While casual fans see two powerful wizards battling for supremacy, Tolkien's private letters reveal a startling insight. Curanir, Saruman, was the eldest and came first. But after him came Mithrandir, who was the last. This seemingly minor detail conceals a mystery that has eluded even dedicated scholars. If Saruman was senior in the Order of Wizards, why did Gandalf, the last to arrive in Middle-earth, consistently outmaneuver him? What advantage did the Grey Pilgrim possess that the leader of the White Council could not comprehend? The films portray their conflict as a spectacular contest of magical might, but the original text suggests something far more intriguing. That Gandalf carried knowledge so profound, it altered the fate of Arda itself. Remember that confrontation at Orthanc, the one where Gandalf's staff shatters Saruman's control? The books tell a dramatically different story, one without magical pyrotechnics, but filled with something far more powerful. And understanding this difference unlocks a revelation about Tolkien's entire mythology that most readers have completely missed. I'm about to share with you the true secret Gandalf kept, not just from Saruman, but from almost everyone in Middle-earth. By the journey's end, you'll never see these wizards the same way again. And more importantly, you'll discover why this hidden dynamic matters not just for Middle-earth, but for our world today. But I should warn you, once you understand what truly separated these two Maya spirits, you may find yourself questioning which of them you more closely resemble. The truth begins with a flame older than time itself. Welcome to Middle-earth Unveiled. If you enjoy thoughtful explorations of Tolkien's universe, subscribing helps our small fellowship grow and reach others who share your passion. Let's dive in. Recall the film's iconic Orthanc confrontation. Ian McKellen's Gandalf defiantly shouting, "You have no power here," as Saruman's staff shatters into splinters. But in Tolkien's version, in The Fellowship of the Ring, Book 2, Chapter 2, something fascinating happens, or rather, doesn't happen. No physical battle occurs. This crucial difference isn't just a filmmaker's embellishment. It highlights the story's true battleground, the realm of hidden knowledge and divine purpose. Think about this. Both wizards began as immortal spirits who helped create the universe. Both were sent to Middle-earth with the same mission. Both possessed immense knowledge of magic and lore. Yet one fell into darkness, while the other became Middle-earth's greatest defender. What made the difference? For casual viewers, these wizards might appear as merely powerful old men with impressive beards and magical abilities, but for Silmarillion scholars, they're Maya, divine spirits who helped sing the universe into existence during the music of the Ainur. Imagine being present at the birth of the universe, helping sing it into existence. Then centuries later, finding yourself trapped in the body of an elderly man with all the aches and limitations that implies. To understand their fundamental rift, we must journey back to the Second Age, when the Valar created the Istari, the Order of Wizards. Though Saruman arrived first as the White Wizard, Unfinished Tales reveals something crucial. The Valar gave the five wizards different modes of thought and feeling. The films simplify their relationship, but Tolkien's deeper lore suggests Gandalf carried a secret flame kindled before the music of the Ainur, knowledge even Saruman's vast intellect couldn't comprehend. Have you ever wondered why Saruman, supposedly the wisest and most powerful, fell so completely while Gandalf remained steadfast? What essential truth about his own nature did the White Wizard forget? A truth Gandalf never lost sight of. See through Saruman's eyes as he gazes into the Palantir, a world reduced to strategic calculation, moves and countermoves, resources to be exploited. Then shift to Gandalf's perspective, where each life glows with inner purpose, where even the smallest hobbit carries a flame worth preserving. The conflict between these wizards isn't just ancient history. It's a blueprint for understanding the very essence of Tolkien's moral universe. And what I'm about to reveal about the flame imperishable will make you question everything you thought you knew about how magic truly works in Middle-earth. When Gandalf tells Saruman, "The burned hand teaches best," he's referencing more than practical wisdom about dragonfire. Compare this to the Silmarillion's creation account. Ilúvatar made visible the flame imperishable. Saruman dismisses this wisdom as folly, revealing his blindness to Eru's secret fire. But why would a Maya, a spirit present at creation, forget such divine truth? Here's where casual readers and hardcore Tolkien scholars often diverge in their understanding, but both are missing a crucial connection that explains everything from Gandalf's fireworks to his resurrection after the Balrog. To casual readers, the flame might seem like abstract mythology, but lore masters recognize it as Eru's creative spark, the essence of free will and being that even Melkor could not replicate. This divine fire transforms creation from mere machinery into something truly alive. Picture Gandalf's fireworks in the Shire, not mere entertainment, but the flame imperishable, dancing in miniature. Feel the warmth as colors burst against the night sky, momentarily connecting the hobbits to creation's first light. This wasn't just Gandalf showing off. It was Gandalf reminding the hobbits, and himself, of what really matters. Saruman's declaration, "The time of the elves is over," exposes his fatal flaw. He sees power as domination, not stewardship. Gandalf's quiet acts, comforting Pippin before battle, guiding Aragorn toward kingship, sitting in silence with Frodo, reveal his reverence for the flame within all beings. Consider when you've dismissed something as insignificant, only to discover its essential value later. This mirrors Saruman's error, seeking power through dominance, while Gandalf discovered it through inspiration and protection. This pattern reveals an intriguing possibility. What if the flame imperishable isn't just metaphorical, but manifests differently in each being? Consider how Gandalf describes the hobbits to Saruman. "You have grown blind to that which is small." This hints at something profound. Perhaps Gandalf's secret was seeing the divine spark in Middle-earth's smallest creatures, precisely where Saruman never thought to look. But the real evidence of this difference isn't in their words. it's in what they created. And Saruman's greatest creation reveals everything about why he could never truly understand Gandalf's power. Saruman's ringcraft explicitly mirrors Sauron's, but carefully analyze his boast. For I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker. Meanwhile, Gandalf steadfastly refused to touch the One Ring. Unfinished Tales reveals why. His ring lore, taught directly by Nienna, the Valar of Mercy in Valinor, ran deeper than Saruman's mechanical understanding. Note the profound irony here. The wizard obsessed with rings of power was given none, while the wizard who renounced domination was entrusted with one of the 3 most powerful rings in Middle-earth. This contradiction isn't a plot hole, it's the key to understanding Tolkien's entire philosophical framework. For film viewers, while Jackson showcases Saruman's Uruk-hai breeding pits, the books emphasize his ring forging, a critical detail that illuminates his corruption. By pursuing Sauron's craft, he aspired to become a second Dark Lord. The difference manifests physically. Saruman surveys Middle-earth from Orthancs's pinnacle like a chessboard of armies, while Gandalf kneels at eye level with a hobbit's trembling hands as they clutch the ring. Feel the cold stone beneath Saruman's feet, then the warm earth under Gandalf's as he meets Frodo's gaze. 2 perspectives on power that could not be more different. Saruman proclaims, "We can bide our time, we can keep our thoughts in our hearts," while Gandalf counters, "He that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom." These contradictory philosophies reveal their fundamental difference in approaching knowledge itself. You might be thinking, isn't this just about Gandalf being more virtuous? But that misses something crucial. Consider this paradox. What if Saruman's pursuit of ringcraft wasn't just about gaining power, but about attempting to replicate something he sensed Gandalf already possessed? This is where things get truly fascinating. Let's examine their contradictory approaches to power. Saruman created a ring to dominate. Gandalf carried Narya, but rarely used its power. The deeper truth? Saruman's ring-making was an attempt to replicate through craft what he sensed Gandalf already possessed naturally. A connection to the primordial creative force that no forged object could ever contain. And this brings us to the most tangible evidence of Gandalf's secret flame. A gift given to him by the oldest and wisest of the elves, who saw something in Gandalf that not even Saruman could perceive. Círdan's gift of Narya to Gandalf provides our most tangible evidence. The Red Ring's fire symbolism aligns perfectly with Gandalf's secret name, Incarnus, which likely derives from Quenya roots, meaning mind of fire, or mind master. By contrast, Saruman's name Curunia merely means man of skill. Many readers miss this crucial moment. Círdan, who had lived through 3 ages of Middle-earth and seen the rise and fall of kingdoms, looked into Gandalf's eyes and saw something that made him surrender one of the most powerful artifacts in existence. What did he see that we've been missing all along? For casual viewers, though the films never show Narya on Gandalf's hand, its presence illuminates his confrontation with the Balrog. "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor," isn't merely impressive dialogue. It's a declaration of his direct connection to the flame imperishable itself. For Tolkien linguists, names encode destiny throughout the legendarium. Gandalf's fire associations versus Saruman's skill or craft reveal their essential natures. Even their Maya origins reflect this. Gandalf was of the people of Manwë and Vardar, associated with air and light, while Saruman was of Aula's people, the craftsman Valar, whose greatest student, Sauron, also fell. The moment Gandalf ignites his staff in Khazad-dûm isn't just combat, it's Narya's hidden fire defying the shadow. Hear the Balrog's roar fade beneath Gandalf's clear command. Feel the heat of divine fire pushing back corruption. This isn't just a wizard using magic, it's a Maya reconnecting with his fundamental nature. Tracking Gandalf's relationship with fire from his fireworks in the Shire to his transformation after the Balrog reveals a consistent theme of purification rather than destruction. He illuminates rather than consumes. This raises a profound possibility that inverts our understanding of these wizards. Narya wasn't given to Gandalf because he required its power. The ring was drawn to him because it recognized the fire already burning within him. Now we need to examine what Tolkien himself said about this. In letter number 156, he explicitly explains Gandalf was the enemy of Sauron, opposing the fire that devours and wastes with the fire that kindles. This contradiction reveals something crucial. Gandalf's fire and Sauron's fire appear similar, but have fundamentally different natures. One consumes, one creates. Saruman, in his hubris, couldn't distinguish between them. He saw Gandalf's restraint as weakness rather than recognizing it as the true mastery of fire, not to destroy, but to inspire. But if this connection to the primordial flame was so crucial, why wasn't Saruman also given this understanding from the beginning? The answer lies in the original mission, the valor assigned to each wizard, and the unexpected choice that separated their destinies forever. The Silmarillion establishes that Manwë specifically chose Gandalf as Eru's instrument, a selection never extended to Saruman. This explains Gandalf's declaration after his return. "I am Saruman, Saruman as he should have been." Here's the part that changes everything about how we understand the wizard's hierarchy. Tolkien's writings suggest Gandalf wasn't originally meant to be the leader at all. His rise wasn't a promotion. It was a restoration of the original divine plan that Saruman had rejected. For film viewers, while Gandalf's transformation to white in the films suggests promotion or power upgrade, Tolkien's intent runs deeper. The white robes signify his unveiled purpose. He isn't merely replacing Saruman, but embodying what Saruman was always meant to be. Contrast. Saruman's tiny figure pacing Orthanca's tower, with Gandalf's luminous resurrection atop Celebdil, dwarfed only by the mountains themselves. Feel the isolation of Saruman's manufactured height compared to Gandalf's natural elevation, one built by domination, the other bestowed through sacrifice. What drove Saruman to betray his purpose? His statement that knowledge, rule, order should replace the old alliances reveals his fundamental misunderstanding of his mission. He sought to impose his will rather than inspire resistance against darkness. He became what C.S. Lewis, Tolkien's close friend, called a conditioner rather than a guardian. Ask yourself this question. When have you been tempted to force your vision on others rather than inspiring them to find their own path? This is precisely the temptation Saruman couldn't resist, and it's eerily relevant to our own struggles with power and leadership today. The manuscript history offers another revelation. In Tolkien's early drafts, Saruman didn't exist. Gandalf was the only wizard. Saruman emerged as Gandalf's narrative shadow, the cautionary example of a Maya who loses sight of Eru's purpose. Their divergent paths represent not just character arcs, but Tolkien's theological exploration of free will versus divine plan. Saruman chose self-determination. Gandalf submitted to a higher purpose, and therein lies the secret Saruman could never grasp. True power comes from surrender, not control. And this brings us to the heart of Gandalf's secret, a truth so profound, it explains not just why he defeated Saruman, but why he was the only being in Middle-earth who could have resisted the One Ring's temptation. The secret lies in Tolkien's concept of Estelle, hope beyond reason or evidence. When Gandalf tells Frodo, all we have to decide is what to do with the time given us, he's channeling Ilúvatar's vision from the music of the Ainur. Saruman's downfall came from rejecting this fundamental truth. He that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. Consider this stunning realization. What we're witnessing between these wizards isn't just a battle of good versus evil. It's the living embodiment of Tolkien's answer to the most fundamental question of existence. What is the true nature of power? Imagine flashing between Saruman's corpse in the Shire mud and Gandalf sailing west at the Grey Havens. One spirit dissolved into bitterness, the other returning to timeless light. Feel the weight of Saruman's body against the earth contrasted with the lightness of Gandalf's spirit, ascending beyond the circles of the world. Here lies our central revelation. While Gandalf remained Olorin at his core, a lover of the Eldar who whispered in their hearts wisdom or fair visions, Saruman abandoned his true nature, degrading into a mere client of Sauron. Letters, number 156. Tolkien confirms this directly, stating Gandalf was the only person who could direct the resistance and refrain from establishing a rival domination. His advantage wasn't a hidden weapon or spell. It was unwavering faith in Eru's design, a connection to the flame imperishable that Saruman's machine mind rejected. The secret was never knowledge withheld. It was self-knowledge abandoned. Both began as Maiar of equal standing, but while Gandalf preserved his essential nature, Saruman became captivated by his Middle-earth identity and status. Yet, a more unsettling interpretation exists. Saruman recognized Gandalf's connection to the flame imperishable all along. His jealousy and desperate attempts to prove his superiority stemmed not from ignorance, but from the painful awareness that he himself had severed this connection. Consider this cultural context. In Norse mythology, Odin, whom Gandalf partially resembles, sacrifices himself to gain wisdom. Similarly, Gandalf sacrifices his life fighting the Balrog and returns transformed. Saruman, conversely, sacrifices others to gain power, a fundamental inversion that dooms him from the start. When Gandalf directly addresses Saruman as Saruman rather than Curanir in their confrontations, he's not just being familiar, he's reminding Saruman of his forgotten purpose. Notice how the pattern interrupts when Gandalf shifts tone from adversary to mourner. "Saruman, Saruman," he cries after the wizard's fall from Orthanc, genuinely grieving for a once noble spirit. The ultimate secret. Gandalf never kept knowledge from Saruman. He kept faith with Eru. And that faith, that connection to the primordial creative force, was something Saruman could have reclaimed at any moment, if only he had remembered who he truly was. But the true significance of this revelation extends far beyond these characters. It speaks directly to Tolkien's most profound concerns about our world. This revelation transforms how we view not just these characters, but Tolkien's entire cosmology. What if I told you the Gandalf-Saruman dynamic isn't just character conflict, but the central theological tension of Middle-earth? Their divergent paths illuminate Tolkien's most profound theme, the choice between domination and stewardship. The most shocking aspect of all this, Tolkien himself identified more with Saruman than Gandalf. In his private letters, he admitted his own tendencies toward intellectual pride and the temptation to control rather than inspire, making this entire wizard conflict a deeply personal struggle externalized in his fiction. Imagine an alternate Middle-earth where Saruman remembered his purpose, where two white wizards stood against Sauron, combining Saruman's craft with Gandalf's compassion. Visualize the restored Isengard becoming a beacon of hope rather than a fortress of industry. For modern readers, this revelation offers a blueprint for authentic leadership. Gandalf's power came not from controlling others, but from inspiring their best selves. What management theorists now call servant leadership. Saruman represents the opposite, leadership through domination and fear. I want you to consider your own life for a moment. When have you been tempted to control rather than inspire? When have you forgotten your true purpose in pursuit of efficiency or power? These are the same tensions Tolkien explored through his wizards. The true battle wasn't Orthanc's confrontation, but Gandalf lighting the beacons of Gondor, igniting hope rather than destroying opposition. Feel the difference between Saruman commanding through fear and Gandalf inspiring through hope. Imagine the warmth of those signal fires spreading across the mountains, connecting isolated outposts into a network of common purpose. Exactly what Gandalf did for the free peoples. In our world of technological advancement and AI, Saruman's mind of metal and wheels feels eerily prophetic. His industrialization of Isengard mirrors our own environmental crises. Gandalf's alternative, respecting natural order while embracing progress, offers wisdom for our climate challenges. I've been building toward this surprising fact. Tolkien himself identified more with Saruman than Gandalf. In letter number 181, he admits to having a Sarumanic voice and fearing the corruption of knowledge. This makes Gandalf's secret even more poignant. It was Tolkien's aspirational self, his hope for redemption from intellectual pride. Beyond Middle-earth, this conflict reflects Tolkien's internal struggle, and our own, between controlling what we fear and inspiring what we love. For film viewers, this perspective transforms every McKellen-Lee scene from mere magical combat into a clash of fundamental worldviews that resonates in our daily choices. Tolkien embedded this wisdom throughout his work. When Gandalf counsels Frodo, "Even the very wise cannot see all ends," he offers the precise antidote to Saruman's corruption: humility before mystery. In our age of data and certainty, Tolkien reminds us that true wisdom emerges not from accumulating knowledge, but from preserving our capacity for wonder. What did Tolkien mean by Gandalf dying? He staggered and fell and was gone. 8 words, one haunting death. But what if everything you've understood about that moment is incomplete? Buried in Tolkien's own letters is a perspective, one so rarely explored, it changes the way we see Gandalf's fate. When Tolkien described this scene, he was clear in his private correspondence. Gandalf really died and was changed. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. Not metaphor, not myth. Death, real and final, something Middle-earth had never known before. This isn't the story most fans have heard. For decades, many have overlooked the moment where Tolkien describes a unique, extraordinary intervention, where the divine for once acts openly. So, what truly happened when Gandalf fell? And why did Tolkien, by his own account, allow this rare breaking of his universe's rules? The answer reshapes everything we thought we knew. Are you ready? Think back to that moment in the movies, Gandalf's fingers slipping from the bridge of Khazad-dûm. It's a scene you don't forget, but Tolkien's words in the book give it even greater weight. In print, Gandalf's fight with the Balrog isn't just action. It's the echo of the world's first battles, fire and shadow, light and loss. The Fellowship's journey through Moria isn't just a risky path, it's a descent into the oldest darkness in Middle-earth. And Gandalf? He's more than a wise wizard with a staff. In Tolkien's world, Gandalf is a Maya, an ancient spirit in mortal form, a guide sent to help, not to rule. His wisdom runs deeper than any kingdom, his strength chosen for service, not show. Tolkien writes that the wizards were embodied in the form of men, but with greater endurance, wisdom, and powers. So as the Fellowship walks into darkness, Gandalf is walking towards something higher, toward a summit most will never see. If you look at any map, the story seems simple. The Fellowship descends into the mines, but beneath it all, Gandalf's true mission is rising, stretching up toward the edge of the impossible. His journey flows from the west, from Valinor, that shining land where silent powers watch over the world. Many retellings skip the cosmic side, but to truly understand Gandalf's story, you have to sense the great design beneath the surface. There's a rule that shapes everything. Gandalf and his kind are bound. The Valar sent them, but they aren't allowed to rule by fear or force. Tolkien set the rule plainly. It was forbidden to them to match force with force, or to seek domination over elves or men by force and fear. So here's the question. If these great powers can only guide with gentle words and quiet wisdom, what does it mean when the greatest power intervenes directly? Why Gandalf? Why here, on the knife edge between hope and despair? Somewhere in the deep below Khazad-dûm, as stone shivers and shadows swirl, the answer waits. How does Tolkien describe death? When Boromir dies, he did not move or speak again. His breath came no more. That's final. For Gandalf, though, he staggered and fell and was gone. Absence, not quite an ending. Even Sauron, after his first defeat, is described as, "He is not dead, but sleepeth." These aren't throwaway words. Tolkien, a professor of language, chose them with surgical care. The absence of finality in Gandalf's death is deliberate, and his transformation into Gandalf the White. It's a linguistic breadcrumb pointing to Tolkien's deepest beliefs about grace and the world's restoration. Feel the minimalist chill. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. He staggered and fell, grasped vainly at the stone, and slid into the abyss. "Fly, you fools!" he cried, and was gone. Ever had a moment in life when something ended with shocking abruptness? A breakup, a lost job, an opportunity that vanished in an instant. That sense of unfinished business, a story interrupted, is exactly what Tolkien wants you to feel. Gandalf's story wasn't over. It was violently interrupted, creating a void in the tale that demands resolution. It's hard to overstate what's at stake in this moment. Gandalf is more than a wise companion. He's the linchpin of hope for the free peoples. Without him, Aragorn's courage falters, Frodo's burden grows heavier, and the fragile alliances of elves, men, and dwarves could shatter. It's not just the fellowship that trembles. The future itself grows dimmer, as if a star were suddenly snuffed from the sky. For Tolkien, whose stories are so often haunted by the threat of ultimate defeat, Gandalf's fall is the moment the world comes closest to irreparable loss. There's an echo here of older myths, Merlin vanishing in the forest, Odin hanging on Yggdrasil, even Christ's descent into death. But Tolkien isn't copying, he's daring something even bolder. He asks, what happens when hope itself is thrown into the abyss? Imagine if Gandalf had truly perished. Middle-earth would lose not just a wizard, but its living link to the divine, like a world cut off from hope. But Tolkien's world makes room for something remarkable: direct divine intervention. At the moment of greatest need, this leads to the big puzzle. If Gandalf truly died, what happened to him in that mysterious void? The answer challenges everything you think you know about Middle-earth's cosmology. To understand Gandalf's death, let's walk his journey. On January 15th, Gandalf falls with the Balrog into the blackness beneath Moria. For 10 days, he battles this ancient demon, climbing from the nethermost caves to the snowy peak of Zirak-Sigil, Silvertine, the summit Gimli reveres. On January 25th, he finally defeats the Balrog. But those 10 days are more than a footnote. Imagine them in cinematic detail, not mere hours, but a relentless struggle in utter darkness, where time itself seems to blur and the roots of the world twist in shadow. Picture Gandalf and the Balrog locked in battle, tumbling through endless caverns older than memory, past ancient bones and primordial fire. It's a conflict as much cosmic as it is physical, a faint echo of the original wars of light and darkness that fill the oldest tales. Every moment is endurance, not just for Gandalf, but for goodness itself. The Balrog is more than a monster. It's the echo of Melkor's first rebellion, evil that refuses to die quietly. Gandalf's ordeal is a reminder. In Middle-earth, darkness doesn't vanish with a single blow. It returns, deeper, and must be faced again and again. Then, after the final clash atop Ziraxagil, darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time. Naked, I was sent back, for a brief time, until my task is done. Not I returned, not I found my way back. I was sent back. This phrase is a seismic shift in Tolkien's legendarium. The rules have always been clear. The Valar can guide, can counsel, but they cannot interfere so directly. For the first and only time in the Third Age, the hand of Eru Ilúvatar reaches in, not as a whisper or a riddle, but as a decisive act. As one great Tolkien scholar observes, this passive phrasing, "I was sent back," is a deliberate marker of something higher at work. We all know the difference between earning a comeback and being given one, like a life unexpectedly saved or a hope rekindled against all odds. Gandalf's return is pure grace, a rescue from outside the story. For Tolkien, the idea of grace, unearned, unexpected, and utterly transformative, is both comfort and challenge. Gandalf's resurrection is grace in action, a gift neither he nor Middle-earth could demand, breaking in at the darkest hour. Here's the crucial detail. The wizards were originally sent by the Valar, Middle-earth's angelic guardians, who set strict rules. Guide, never dominate. Only Eru, the one above all, could override those cosmic laws. When Gandalf comes back, it's not just another miracle. It's the Creator himself, stepping into the story, recommissioning his servant. Tolkien puts it plainly. He was sent back by authorities, the one who is above all authorities. In all the history of Middle-earth's Third Age, this kind of direct intervention happens almost never, and it changes Gandalf, not just reviving him, but transforming him at the core. Gandalf isn't simply restored, he's remade. The clue is in the change from grey to white. When his friends meet him again in Fangorn, his hair was white as snow in the sunshine, and gleaming white was his robe. The eyes under his deep brows were bright, piercing as the rays of the sun. This dazzling whiteness isn't just a costume change. In Tolkien's world, it's a symbol of renewed authority, spiritual purification, almost like a baptism. Gandalf himself speaks of passing through fire and deep water. In myth and faith traditions, those are the elements of cleansing and rebirth. Have you ever met someone who's truly survived a brush with death, an accident, illness, trauma? Outwardly, they're the same, but something's changed. A new light in the eyes, a new depth to their presence. Gandalf's transformation is that, on a mythic scale. The Fellowship doesn't just regain a leader, they receive a messenger who's glimpsed the farthest shore. Consider the mythic weight of this change. Gandalf the Grey, known for humility and quiet wisdom, is transformed into Gandalf the White, a figure dazzling and awe-inspiring, yet burdened with greater responsibility. It's not a promotion he sought, but one he receives only through sacrifice. This is Tolkien's recurring theme, a sudden miraculous turn toward joy at the very edge of despair. Gandalf's transformation is not just a recovery, it's the world's answer to loss, the first faint sunrise after the longest night. Tolkien clarifies, he was enhanced in power as a created person, but his wisdom, perception, and benevolence were greater. It's not about leveling up his magic, it's about deeper wisdom and new authority. Contemporary readers, used to upgrades and power boosts, often miss that distinction. And for the Fellowship, meeting Gandalf again is more than a reunion. It's a shock of hope, a sign of what redemption in Middle-earth might look like, not erasing the scars of darkness, but letting light return all the brighter for having been lost. When Gandalf rejoins his friends, he conceals his identity at first, not as a trick, but because he's processing an encounter with the divine that words can't easily convey. Who hasn't struggled to explain a transformative experience? Before the fall, Saruman was the top wizard, head of the White Council. Gandalf was just the Grey Pilgrim. But now, after the Creator's intervention, the hierarchy flips. Gandalf, faithful in sacrifice, is promoted above Saruman, whose own authority was corrupted by pride. It's a lesson. In Tolkien's world, true authority is granted not by ambition or domination, but by self-giving sacrifice. Gandalf rises, not because he grasped for power, but because he gave himself for others. Think of any moment in your own life when new responsibility landed on you, not through striving, but through being tested and found faithful. Multiply that by a mythic scale, and you have Gandalf's new calling. The Balrog battle is both a physical and spiritual trial. Tolkien writes, "The wizards had failed, or if you like, the crisis had become too grave and needed an enhancement of power." Most readings stop at the surface, missing this. Gandalf's transformation is the Third Age's most direct act of Eru Ilúvatar in the story. Where the divine usually acts in whispers and shadows, here the Creator literally sends Gandalf back to push back the darkness. So when Gandalf confronts Saruman, "I am Gandalf the White, who has returned from death," he speaks with the full weight of the author's authority, not just a character arc, a cosmic rebalancing. For the close reader, there are hints throughout the Legendarium that Gandalf's journey is unique. The Silmarillion, with its tales of heroes and gods, rarely depicts intervention so direct. Even the greatest elves and men, from Feanor to Luthien, face their fates with only glimpses of grace. Gandalf's return is an anomaly, a rare, deliberate act by Tolkien to show that sometimes the rules can be rewritten in service of hope. And perhaps that's the deepest magic of all. Not the power to dominate or destroy, but the willingness to sacrifice and to be transformed for the sake of others. What then does all this mean? Not just for Gandalf, not just for Middle-earth, but for the underlying architecture of Tolkien's mythology, and, by subtle extension, the fragile mythologies by which we steer our own lives. Tolkien, whose every sentence is a palimpsest of deep reading and deeper feeling, does not leave us adrift. He names the pattern with the clarity of someone who has known the trenches of sorrow and the rarefied air of hope. Gandalf really died and was changed. The wizards, as such, had failed. Or if you like, the crisis had become too grave and needed an enhancement of power. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. Here, for those whose worldview is shaped by the echo of old liturgies, the pattern is familiar: sacrifice, loss, descent into the unthinkable, and then, by some grace that logic cannot account for, a return, transfigured. But even for the secular reader, even for the reader whose faith is only in story itself, there is something elemental here. Tolkien's world does not allow despair to ossify into certainty. At the nadir, when hope is exiled, and every narrative seems to have spent itself, something astonishing occurs, not by merit, not by calculation, but by the sheer, incalculable generosity of the cosmos. Grace, that word so often stripped of its meaning, comes surging in, unheralded, unwarranted, reweaving the fabric of fate. The chronicles of the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings record only a handful of such interventions: the ruin of Númenor, the reshaping of the world, and now, this wild, luminous moment on the peak of Xeraxagil, where all the rules bend toward mercy and a wizard is sent back, not as he was, but as he is needed to be. Each of these, Tolkien reminds us, is a eucatastrophe, a sudden and miraculous grace, never to be counted on to recur. Gandalf's return, then, is not the sleight of hand of lesser storytelling. It is not the neat undoing of loss, nor the denial of suffering's claim on the world. It is, instead, Tolkien's most extravagant act of trust, in story, in readers, in the possibility that the universe itself might, in its rarest moments, conspire to let in the light. To read this is to be reminded that no night is endless, that the laws which hem us in may, at the hour of utmost need, become porous to grace, that despair is not the final architecture of reality, that hope, like light, travels farther than we think. Perhaps this is Tolkien's quietest and most radical gift, to suggest that even the deepest abyss is not beyond transformation, that every fall contains, folded within it, the blueprint for resurrection. Why does this matter? Because Gandalf's return is Tolkien's answer to darkness. He knew real war, real loss. He wrote to his son, "What a dreadful, fear-darkened, sorrow-laden world we live in. But there is still something to do." Gandalf's resurrection is no trick. It's the fulcrum. Without him, the fellowship breaks. Theoden stays lost. Gondor falls. With him, hope lives. Step back. Gandalf's fall and return echo Middle-earth's own story. A plunge into shadow, a climb toward dawn. Tolkien called his work a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. Unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. But the lesson runs deeper than faith. After ruin, renewal. Even in the last hour, the day can turn. Picture Fangorn. 3 friends see a figure in white where only loss stood before. For a moment, hope feels impossible. Then it appears. That's why this moment lasts. Gandalf's return isn't escape. It's proof. Darkness is not the end. Sometimes what's lost returns, not as it was, but changed, bearing light from the dark. Gandalf says, "I am Gandalf the White, who has returned from death." He speaks to Middle-earth and to us. Tolkien wrote, "The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. Hold fast. Even the longest night breaks. Sometimes light finds you, changed but new, born from the dark." Gandalf died, and the world gave him back. Imagine Gandalf hurtling into darkness, flames and shadow at his back, his purpose in ruins. Most stories would end here, but not this one. Something breaks the rules. Gandalf returns, changed. Not luck, not a fluke, but something earned. Centuries of sacrifice, 1,000 refusals of power, all leading to this one impossible moment. We call Gandalf's return a miracle, a gift sent down. But what if it's something else? A verdict? What if, at last, the universe weighed a life and found it worthy? Stick with me. By the end, you'll see Gandalf and Middle-earth through new eyes. Because what happened to Gandalf wasn't random. It was deserved. Let's set the stage. To grasp what truly happened to Gandalf, we need to peel back the wizard's disguise and see who he was beneath the hat and cloak. Gandalf was never just an old man with a staff. He was Olorin, one of the Maya, spirits who predate the world itself. In the beginning, he walked in the gardens of Lorien, learning pity and wisdom from the Valar themselves. For Gandalf to leave that world was itself a sacrifice, a willing step into exile for the sake of a world on the brink. Imagine leaving behind a realm of light and music, for a land of shadow and struggle, choosing loneliness just for the hope you might help others. When the shadows lengthened over Middle-earth, the Valar sent 5 of these Maiar to aid elves and men, clad in frail mortal bodies, forbidden to reveal themselves in forms of majesty or to seek to rule others by force or fear. They would be guides, not conquerors. Here's the core challenge. While Saruman studied rings of power and Radagast spoke only to beasts, Gandalf chose the hardest path. 2,000 years spent as a servant, never a ruler. Think how much easier it would have been to seize power outright, to command rather than counsel, to rule rather than guide, yet he never did. Here's what's brilliant about Tolkien's Catholic imagination. He takes the theological principle that true authority comes through service and makes it the engine of his entire plot. The Istari aren't restrained despite their power. Their restraint is what makes them truly powerful. Gandalf proves the rule, but it's on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, under flaming shadow and trembling stone, that everything changes. Let's follow Gandalf's pattern, because in Middle-earth patterns matter. Time and again he's offered power and turns it down. Gandalf's greatness isn't always found in legend or battle. Often it's built quietly, moment by moment, in the shadows and margins of Middle-earth. Picture Gandalf in his earliest years as a wanderer, traveling lonely roads, speaking with dwarves in the Blue Mountains, listening to the fears of elves as darkness stirs in Greenwood the Great. He pauses to share a pipe with a farmer near Bree, offers comfort to the anxious, and quietly lifts the spirits of the despairing. His work is built through small acts. A warning whispered here, a story shared by firelight there, a gentle push in the right direction when hope seems lost. Always he seeks out those on the margins, hobbits dismissed as provincial, overlooked heroes carrying hidden burdens, those weighed down by sorrow the world ignores. Sometimes the smallest act becomes the spark for something vast. One night in Bag End, Bilbo Baggins sits restless and afraid, and it's Gandalf's quiet encouragement that turns fear into resolve, launching a tale that will echo through generations. This pattern of humble service continues even at the height of crisis. At the Council of Elrond, when the fate of the world hangs on his counsel, Gandalf doesn't bluff or pretend omniscience. When asked about Gollum's ultimate fate, he admits uncertainty. When pressed about the full extent of Saruman's treachery, he acknowledges the limits of his knowledge. Throughout the council, Gandalf repeatedly uses phrases like, "I do not know," and "I cannot tell." Here's a wizard who could easily intimidate others into silence, yet he chooses to model intellectual honesty instead. Across centuries, this quiet consistency builds something powerful. In every corner of Middle-earth, rumors and tales of Gandalf's kindness become woven into the folklore, a quiet web of relationships and trust that proves as much a bulwark against Sauron as any forged sword. As Corey Olsen observes, Gandalf's job is to help other people to succeed, not to show off his own power. This stewardship, the humility to serve without fanfare, to see potential where others see only insignificance, becomes the foundation for everything that follows. But what happens when that foundation is tested by the ultimate temptation? It's tempting to imagine Gandalf's only great test was the One Ring, but Tolkien's world is full of subtler trials, some as insidious as any dark artifact. When the White Council offers him its leadership, he declines, sensing how ambition can twist even the noblest intent. Here's what's brilliant about this. Tolkien is showing us that the very act of refusing power is what makes someone worthy of it. Every time you've seen a character in fiction reluctantly accept leadership, they're following Gandalf's template. Time and again, rulers and lords invite Gandalf to stay, to wield authority in Gondor, or to command among the Rohirrim. Each time, Gandalf refuses crowns and titles, preferring instead to plant seeds of hope and let others harvest the fruit. Think about it. Saruman studied power, catalogued it, craved it. Radagast forgot about it entirely, lost in his birds and beasts. But Gandalf, he carried it like a burden he was afraid to put down too quickly, always asking, "Who needs this more than I want it?" That's why, when we see him return in white, Tolkien gives us that perfect line. "Indeed, I am Saruman," one might almost say, Saruman as he should have been. There's always the invitation to rest, to be celebrated, or to wield his influence directly. But Gandalf's greatness lies not just in refusing power, but in using his gifts to elevate others. Letting Aragorn discover his own strength, encouraging Frodo to find unexpected courage, awakening hope where none seems possible. As Michael Drought writes, the great danger in Tolkien's world is always power itself, especially the desire to wield it over others. Gandalf's wisdom is his refusal to dominate, to trust that real victory comes through sacrifice, not conquest. But Gandalf's greatest trial wasn't the ring, or even the White Council. It was what waited beneath Khazad-dûm. Now imagine the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Fire reflects off ancient stones. The Fellowship freezes in terror as the Balrog emerges. And here's a detail that's easy to miss. It isn't just any foe. At the bridge, Legolas cries out, "I, a Balrog is come." Gandalf later recounts his battle with the Balrog to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli in Fangorn Forest. There, he names it. "A Balrog of Morgoth, what an evil fortune, and I am already weary." Gandalf isn't just fighting a monster, he's fighting the legacy of the first Dark Lord, the original corruption of his own kind. This is personal. When Gandalf declares, "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor, you cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you, flame of Udun. Go back to the shadow, you cannot pass." He's not just being poetic. As Tolkien scholar Verlin Flieger explains, the secret fire is that which imparts being, the divine spark at the heart of all creation. Gandalf isn't just invoking poetry, he's grounding himself in the source of all good, a reality Morgoth and Sauron can only mock. He is, above all, a servant, not a master, not a tyrant. He puts himself between evil and those he loves. When the bridge collapses, Gandalf could save himself. Instead, he falls with the Balrog, fighting beneath the world. For a time that cannot be measured, Gandalf drifts beyond the circles of the world, neither living nor dead, caught in a silence deeper than sleep. His journey echoes that of Glorfindel, another who died a heroic death and returned. But Gandalf's trial is even deeper. He faces the loss not just of body, but of self, and the test is whether his long years of humility and sacrifice will hold in the void. What ultimately determines Gandalf's fate is not a single act, but the sum of 1,000 choices, a ledger written not in victories, but in restraint and service. Imagine a cosmic scale, each moment of humility and mercy adding weight until, at last, it tips in his favor. Recall a few scenes. Gandalf's most famous refusal of power comes early, when Frodo offers him the ring in Bag End. Tolkien writes, "But I have so little of any of these things. You are wise and powerful. Will you not take the ring?" "No!" cried Gandalf, springing to his feet. "With that power, I should have power too great and terrible, and over me the ring would gain a power still greater and more deadly. Do not tempt me, for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. I dare not take it, not even to keep it safe, unused. The wish to wield it would be too great for my strength. I shall have such need of it. Great perils lie before me." But this is only one thread in the fabric of his destiny, declining the headship of the White Council, choosing to lift up the smallest and least, hobbits, a king brought low by grief, a dwarf driven by loyalty. Here's what makes this profound. In our world, we often wonder if small, unseen acts really matter. Gandalf's story is Tolkien's resounding yes. Every choice to serve rather than be served, every moment of putting others first, becomes part of something larger. Unlike Saruman, whose every choice is a calculation of self-interest, Gandalf's record is a steady accumulation of faithfulness. When Gandalf falls, the universe responds, not to rescue him, but to acknowledge the weight of his accumulated virtue. If you imagine the universe as keeping accounts, a metaphor, not Tolkien's literal claim, Gandalf's balance sheet is filled not with treasures of power, but with investments in courage, hope, and sacrifice. At the moment of his greatest loss, every small act he performed comes due, and the scales tip. Now, with the dust of myth settled and the great silence after the battle humming, Gandalf's transformation reveals itself for what it truly is. Not a reward for a valiant death, but the universe, in its quiet and incorruptible wisdom, recognizing a life steadfastly devoted to the service of others. Gandalf's path was not an ascent in search of authority, but the slow, often lonely climb of refusal of shortcuts, of the intoxicating music of power, of the easy path that comes from dominance. Each decision to serve, each moment of humility in the shadows, accumulates into something that even the powers of Middle-earth must finally acknowledge. No other in Tolkien's great tapestry passes this test so completely. Saruman, who desired the mantle most, is undone by it. Radagast the Gentle loses himself in the wild. Only Gandalf, persistent in his long obedience, makes himself a vessel for something larger and more luminous. Tom Shippey puts it plainly. Gandalf, after his fall and return, is not just the old wizard improved. He is, as he says, Saruman as he should have been, someone who has passed the test and been promoted because of it. The word promotion here holds a subtle paradox. What Gandalf gains isn't just greater power, but the visible perfection of what he always was beneath the veil. So it is that Gandalf stands among his friends and quietly speaks. Indeed, I am Saruman, one might almost say, Saruman as he should have been. It is a moment at once mournful and redemptive, the mythic scales restored to balance. The white robes he now wears represent not the absence of the other colors, but their perfection. Grey, gold, blue, all gathered into brilliance. In Tolkien's moral architecture, power does not flow to those who clamor for it. It rises to those who have made themselves empty for the sake of others. Gandalf's new stature is not a miracle bestowed, but a harvest reaped. The inevitable flowering of a life lived in the shadowed places for the light of others. The white robes at last are not merely the end of a journey, but the visible justice that crowns it, the embodiment of every silent, hidden virtue gathered into light. Gandalf's journey is more than an arc. It's a blueprint for true leadership and moral greatness. In a world where power is so often claimed by the loudest voice or the strongest hand, Tolkien offers another way, greatness quietly proven, never seized. Who are the Gandalfs in our world? Maybe it's the teacher who lifts a student's spirits without recognition, or the nurse who chooses kindness day after day, even when no one is watching. Picture those in your own life who wield authority gently, mentors, parents, colleagues. How many are great, not because they sought it, but because they proved, over time, they could be trusted? Perhaps the truest test of character comes not on a bridge or in battle, but in our daily refusals of selfishness and our willingness to lift others up. In a world that celebrates dominance, Gandalf's way invites us to choose service, and in doing so, to shape a legacy that endures far beyond our time. Sacrifice, Tolkien suggests, has a power that echoes beyond the self. When Gandalf fell with the Balrog, he didn't just save the Fellowship. He proved that pure, selfless heroism is possible, even in a broken world. And here's the part many miss. Gandalf's return isn't just mercy or miracle. It's justice. He didn't get a second chance by accident. The universe saw what he had become and responded, finally, with perfect acknowledgement. When Gandalf returns, clothed in white and bearing the wisdom of all his trials, Middle-earth itself seems to breathe again. Shadows recede, hope is rekindled, and for one shining moment, the world remembers that true greatness is always, first and last, a matter of the heart. So the next time you read that moment, when Gandalf returns, don't just see resurrection, see recognition. See the universe itself saying, finally, someone who got it right. And maybe, just maybe, see a reminder that the best leaders aren't the ones reaching for crowns. They're the ones who keep their hands free to help others up. That's why Gandalf got exactly what he deserved, not punishment, but recognition. Not mercy, but justice. Not intervention, but acknowledgement. In Tolkien's legendarium, and perhaps our own, character is destiny, and sacrifice is never truly in vain. Who really knew Gandalf's secret? The Fellowship stumbles out of darkness, heartbroken and afraid. Behind them, Moria's shadows swallow their guide. Gandalf is gone. But here's what no one says. As they mourn, do any of them truly grasp who they've lost? Because most of them, Frodo, Sam, Boromir, believe they've lost a friend, a wizard, maybe even a father figure. But the truth is more astonishing. They've just watched a being older than the mountains vanish into myth. Truth is, only 3 in all of Middle-earth held the secret. Their silence would shape the fate of the ring and the world. So, who really knew Gandalf's secret? And why did it matter so much? Think about Sam, holding Frodo as they stumble into the daylight. His grief raw and completely human. To him, Gandalf was the old wizard who made fireworks dance in the night and told stories by the fire. What if that spark in Gandalf's eye wasn't just playfulness, but the glow of ancient light, the same light that shone before the first sunrise? Aragorn once said, "Gandalf is greater than you Shire folk know. As a rule, you can only see his jokes and toys, but this business of ours will be his greatest task." And when Legolas saw the wizard's staff burn with white fire, did he recognize something from the oldest elf songs? The truth cuts to the heart of every friendship in Tolkien's story, because the word that reveals who Gandalf really is never appears in The Lord of the Rings. Not once. There was a secret at the heart of Middle-earth that slipped past every reader, a secret so well hidden that only a few of the wisest ever saw it. To find this hidden truth, we need to go back, not just to the Shire, but to the very beginning. To when Middle-earth was young and secrets walked openly. Picture the shores of Middle-earth around the year 1000 of the Third Age. 5 figures arrive, looking like old men worn down by travel, carrying simple walking sticks. Anyone watching would think they were wandering teachers or hermits seeking wisdom. This was no accident. Tolkien later explained their nature in a letter. Nowhere is the place or nature of the wizards made fully explicit. It appears, finally, that they were the near equivalent in the mode of these tales of angels. These were the Istari, the wizards, and their arrival was one of the greatest tricks in Middle-earth's history. But this wasn't a cruel trick. It came from wisdom and need. Tolkien tells us these 5 weren't men at all, but Maya, immortal spirits who had lived in the Blessed Realm since before the world was made. The wizards weren't meant to look like old men, but were spirits like the Valar, only less powerful. They were the same type of being as Sauron himself, but completely different in heart and purpose. Two flames from the same fire, one burning for hope, the other for power. But here's what matters most. They came to Middle-earth with strict rules. The Valar had learned hard lessons from fighting before. When they had made war directly on Morgoth, they had broken the world itself. This time would be different. The wizards were given bodies that aged and could be hurt. They felt hunger, tiredness, even doubt. Most importantly, they couldn't reveal who they really were or fight Sauron with their full power. Their job was to guide and inspire the free peoples, not rule them. This disguise worked for many reasons. It kept the wizards safe from wanting to use their full power, a want that had already corrupted Saruman and led one of the blue wizards astray. It also meant that any victory over evil would come from the courage of Middle-earth's people, not from divine help. But for our story, the most important thing is this: only the wisest and oldest beings in Middle-earth knew their true nature. The wizards themselves were told to keep this secret. So Gandalf walked among Middle-earth's peoples for over 2,000 years, bringing hope to the Shire, advising kings in Gondor, standing guard against darkness, while his true identity stayed one of the age's best-kept secrets. But among all who knew him, who guessed the truth, who loved him as a friend and respected him as a guide, how many ever saw the immortal fire burning inside that weathered body? If knowing the truth could change everything, why hide it? The answer lies in uncovering Middle-earth's greatest disguise. Start with Bilbo's eyes. Picture him opening his door to find Gandalf's familiar silhouette, the pointed hat casting shadows, that staff scraping against the doorframe. What does Bilbo see? A friend. Someone who remembers birthdays and makes fireworks bloom like flowers in the night sky. Someone who fits perfectly into the Shire's gentle rhythms, who makes smoke rings dance and sits comfortably by a hobbit hole fire. This is no accident. Gandalf becomes exactly what the hobbits need him to be. Wonderful, yes, but safely wonderful. When he grows stern with Bilbo over the ring, it's the authority of a grandfather, not the terrible weight of a being who watched the first stars kindle. Follow Sam through the entire quest. Watch him witness Gandalf fall into shadow at Khazad Dûm. See him encounter the White Wizard blazing with power in Fangorn. How does he react? Gandalf, I thought you were dead. But then I thought I was dead myself. Is everything sad going to come untrue? What's happened to the world? Joy, relief, wonder. But no cosmic recognition. No sudden understanding that he's speaking to an immortal spirit older than the sun. And here's the crucial question. Would Sam's love have been the same? Would any hobbit have shown the same natural courage if they'd known they were taking counsel from one of the powers of the world? Sometimes, innocence is a shield as much as a blindness. The hobbits love Gandalf purely because they love him simply. Their ignorance isn't a flaw. It's the foundation of everything that follows. But that's only the beginning of what the rest of Middle-earth saw, or failed to see. But step outside the Shire, and the picture grows more complex. Boromir sees a wise counselor, perhaps the wisest he's ever known, but still just a man. He respects Gandalf's authority, but it is the wisdom of a learned leader, not the presence of an immortal. Aragorn senses the depths in Gandalf, but even he cannot define them. He's lived among the wise, steeped in ancient lore. But when it comes to Gandalf's true nature, he remains a watcher at the edge of the mystery, intuitive, respectful, but never fully knowing. Aragorn's trust is instinctive. He follows Gandalf not because of titles or power, but because he recognizes greatness that can't be measured or named. Denethor, steward of Gondor, comes closest among men to glimpsing the truth. His pride makes him wary of Gandalf's influence, but even his hostility is tinged with a kind of fear, a fear that hints at forces beyond his understanding. Denethor rails against the Grey Fool, but beneath the insult is the anxiety of a man who senses he is outmatched in ways he cannot explain. Theoden, freed from Saruman's shadow, greets Gandalf with something approaching awe, but his reverence is for a figure of legend, a master of wisdom and words, not for an immortal spirit who watched the world's beginning. So it is with men in Middle-earth. Suspicion lingers, wonder grows, but certainty remains out of reach. They move in the presence of greatness, sensing its weight, but the true depths remain forever, just beyond their grasp. Now watch Gimli throughout the quest. His respect for Gandalf grows with every deed witnessed. The courage in Moria, the wisdom in council, the power against enemies. But here's what's telling. Gimli never asks what Gandalf is, only whether he can be trusted. To a dwarf's practical mind, actions matter more than ancestry. Gandalf has proven himself with axe and deed, and that's enough. But this leaves us with the most intriguing question of all. What about Legolas? Of everyone in the Fellowship, the elf should be the most likely to pierce Gandalf's disguise. Elves possess memories stretching back thousands of years. They know of the Valar, the Maiar, the great spirits that shape the world. Some, like Elrond and Galadriel, had even walked in the light of the two trees and fought beside the powers themselves. When Legolas sees Gandalf transformed in Fangorn, with power blazing from that once familiar figure, surely he must sense something from the oldest songs. He's the first to cry out, "Mithrandir! Mithrandir!" Is this elven sight piercing ancient veils, or simply keen observation? Here's the crucial detail. Even if Legolas suspected the truth, he never speaks it aloud. Not once. His silence could be wisdom, respect for Gandalf's chosen disguise. Or it could mean that, even for the immortal, some mysteries are too deep to name. If even the elves, with all their ancient knowledge, remained in the dark, then who in Middle-earth could possibly know the truth? The answer brings us to one of the world's most carefully guarded secrets, kept by only 3. Tolkien gives us the answer in Unfinished Tales. None save maybe Elrond, Círdan, and Galadriel discovered of what kind they were or whence they came. Only these 3, the greatest of the wise, recognized Gandalf's true nature and mission. They alone were present when the Istari first arrived in Middle-earth. They alone were ancient and wise enough to see past the disguise, beings who had fought Morgoth, walked in the light of the two trees, and survived the ruin of ages. For over 2,000 years, Elrond, Galadriel, and Círdan maintained a conspiracy of silence. Sometimes, knowing too much changes the fate of the world, and the story you thought you knew. Now picture the Council of Elrond with this knowledge. Elrond presides over debates about the fate of the ring, listening to arguments from all the free peoples, and sitting beside him, offering counsel as Gandalf the Grey, is a Maiar, one of the Holy Ones, a spirit from before the world's beginning. Elrond knows this. He knows the room holds not just a wise wizard, but a being of the ancient order of creation itself. Yet he says nothing. The disguise is maintained, the secret preserved. Why? Because the moment Gandalf's companions understood they traveled with a Maiar, everything would change. Decisions would be deferred to him. Courage might become dependence, and victory over evil would belong not to the free peoples, but to the powers of the West. The conspiracy of silence wasn't just about keeping a secret. It was about preserving the very possibility of hope. Without that silence, the world's last hope might never have been born. And this leads us to the most remarkable revelation of all. Now, at last, we arrive at the secret kept behind 1,000 veils, hidden in the hush of ancient halls and in the silent awe of star-filled skies. Gandalf, this humble, pipe-smoking wanderer, this friend of hobbits and architect of hope, was not merely a wizard, not merely a wise old man guiding the lost through the darkness. He was Olorin, a Maya, one of the Aina. Think about what this means. That gentle figure teaching Bilbo smoke ring tricks. He heard the world's first music before the mountains were born. He helped shape the cosmos with the harmonies of creation, his spirit tracing the original lines of beauty and suffering. That wizard sharing stories by the fire in Bag End. He walked in the gardens of the Blessed Realm, learned mercy from Nienna herself, and chose to leave paradise behind and return, willingly diminished, to the dusk and pain of Middle-earth. But here's Tolkien's masterstroke. He hid this truth not just from the characters, but from us. Search all 600 pages of The Lord of the Rings. The word Maya never appears, not once. Even as the world is remade in the fire of the ring, the mask is never fully lifted. This isn't an oversight, it's genius. Wayne Hammond and Christina Scull call it an air of wonder and ambiguity. But it's something deeper, an invitation to marvel, to live with mystery, to cherish the quiet grandeur that exists beyond our naming. Because Tolkien wanted us to know Gandalf as his friends knew him, through acts of daily kindness, not cosmic credentials. We see him not as a divine equation, but as someone who chooses to make joy out of fireworks on a summer night, who listens more than he speaks, who believes more in the small than the mighty. But the truth changes everything. Michael Drought writes that Tolkien's genius was to operate on multiple planes of knowledge. The characters know one thing, the reader another, the world itself something deeper still. And now we see it. Gandalf's concealed identity isn't a riddle to be solved, but a window through which we glimpse the grandeur of all hidden things. Now reread every scene with this knowledge burning in your mind. Every time Gandalf sits in Bag End, savoring his pipe, he's not just a wizard among friends. He's an ancient spirit of light, finding meaning in the warmth of a hobbit's hearth. When he stands on the bridge at Khazad Dûm, defying the Balrog, it's not just courage, it's sacrifice at the deepest level. A being who helped sing the stars into existence, willingly facing oblivion for the fleeting salvation of mortals. And here's what makes it even more profound. Tolkien confirmed the reality of that sacrifice in a private letter. Gandalf really died and was changed. So Gandalf sacrificed himself, was accepted and enhanced and returned. Gandalf's incarnation was real. He felt hunger, weariness, doubt. He could die. When Tolkien says he really died at Moria, he means it. This wasn't an immortal playing at mortality. This was divinity choosing to be genuinely vulnerable, genuinely afraid, genuinely human. Elrond, Galadriel, and Círdan kept this secret not from cruelty, but from love. They understood that Gandalf's greatness lay not in the power he possessed, but in the humility he embraced. He chose to guide, not to rule, to become small so others could become great. The greatest secret isn't what Gandalf was. It's the undying light he chose to kindle, again and again, in the hearts of those who followed him. Why does any of this matter? Why should the hidden identity of a wandering wizard echo so powerfully across the ages of story and soul? Because, in Tolkien's world, the truest acts of courage are not born of certainty, but of trust. Imagine the Fellowship, broken, battered, and afraid, rising to greatness, not because they marched behind a god, but because they chose, again and again, to follow a friend. Had they known Gandalf as Maya, as architect of stars, would their loyalty have been so freely given? Would Sam have found the courage to take one more step on the slopes of Mount Doom? Or would Aragorn have grown into the king he was meant to be? The answer, Tolkien seems to whisper, is no. The secret preserved the dignity of mortal choice, the trembling bravery of hearts that leap without knowing, the heroism of hands held in darkness. But beneath this, a deeper wonder flows. In Middle-earth, as in our own world, identity is never the whole of a person. Destiny is made not from origins, but from choices. Gandalf and Sauron, cut from the same cloth of creation, become opposites not because of what they are, but because of what they love and serve. And so Tolkien's greatest magic is not to reveal, but to invite us to marvel, to remind us, as Verlin Flieger writes, that it is not always knowledge, but the experience of wonder that is paramount. Gandalf is known and unknown, at home in the humble and the epic, his greatness flickering just beyond the grasp of understanding. This is the mystery at the heart of Tolkien's faith, too, that the sacred moves quietly among us, its presence felt in humility and hope more than in thunder or triumph. The true miracles are often unannounced. A teacher who sees you, a friend who stands by you at the crossroads, a stranger whose kindness rethreads the needle of your day. Their nature is hidden, but their gifts are real. So perhaps we are not meant to know every secret or name every source of light. Perhaps the truest magic is not in seeing through every disguise, but in learning to cherish what shines through. The next time you meet Gandalf on the page, notice the flash in his eye, the hush that falls when he speaks, the spark of something ancient beneath the ordinary. Notice how Tolkien never breaks the spell, never quite tells us everything. Because maybe in the end, the stories that change us most are the ones that leave us with questions. Stories that teach us to honor mystery, to love what we cannot fully understand. Sometimes the deepest wisdom is not in knowing, but in wondering well. Sometimes the brightest light is that which slips, quietly, through the cracks of our certainty, asking only that we look and keep looking, and let ourselves be changed.